Good stuff there. It was nice to get to know one of the newest BYU football players, Jay Bryant Strother. And if you missed that interview or any of the shows so far, there's more coming. Don't worry. But if you missed hour number 1 or that interview, we'll put it up on the podcast feed. Cougar Sports Saturday, wherever you get your podcast feed. Would love it if you liked it or add comments. Like, we're always welcoming constructive criticism or ways we can make the show better for you. Because what I love about the show, Mitch, is from its inception, over a decade ago, this show is for BYU fans. Look, you and I, we grew up BYU fans, man. And so we want to serve you guys the best we can. And if you can give us some feedback on our podcast feed, that would be great. Transitioning now, Mitch, to a little heavier tone. In this past week, a couple notable deaths, one in the BYU family, Frank Arnold, and then staying in the basketball world, the logo, Jerry West. He passed away earlier in the week. It's a part of life, but it's always crazy when these figures who played such a significant role in their respective sports pass away. It's fun to reminisce on the impact they made. And Frank Arnold, there haven't been a lot of BYU basketball coaches, Mitch. So, that's noteworthy in itself because you have to have your origin somewhere. And Frank Arnold played a role in the success of BYU basketball.
We were just talking last week with Duff Tittle and Brett Pine, the 100 years of BYU football. And we were talking to him off the air and about how, Kalani's one of 3 men in football that's on the earth today that's a head coach that could say he was the head coach at BYU football. And, Frank Arnold was one of very few. Him, Roger Reed, Steve Cleveland, Dave Rose, Mark Pope, and Kevin Young. That's pretty – I'd have to check Glenn Potter. But, there haven't been many that can say they've been the head coach of the Cougars at the men's basketball program. And Frank Arnold – he led BYU from 75 to 83 and guided them to an Elite Eight in, 1981, the best finish in program history in the NCAA tournament. And, he recruited Danny Ainge from Oregon. He recruited Greg Kite from Texas and pieced together an outstanding roster that got BYU one step away from being at their first ever Final Four. And, Frank Arnold, when he was hired, it's interesting when you look back at, I kind of dove into the archives a little bit and what kind of the pulse was when he got hired as the head coach. And it was not well received. People wanted Liddell Anderson as the head coach who, he passed away a handful of years ago. He was a former Utah State coach at the time, later became the BYU head coach after Frank Arnold. But Frank Arnold being an assistant on John Wooden's staff at UCLA, he had a great resume and was someone that, well received by, BYU administrators, and they went with him, and he did a really good job with Danny Ainge and got BYU to some deep runs in the NCAA tournament. But it's interesting, too. I think back to 3 years ago, I was talking with Mark Pope about, this was at BYU Basketball Media Day, and I was chatting with Mark Pope in a one-on-one we were having, and I brought up how he had an alumni day and brought back Roger Reed, brought back Frank Arnold, brought back, Steve Cleveland and Dave Rose. And he was bringing up how it was cool to see Frank Arnold there because when he, left BYU, it wasn't the most, it was kind of like a forced out deal. It wasn't like a ceremonious deal. It was kind of like a firing. And I know BYU is not known for that. So it's just, it's cool that he came back and was part of it for a little bit. He had a grandchild who recently just graduated from BYU. His son, Gib Arnold, was a head coach of the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors and was recently part of the Utah State basketball program as a support staff member this past year. And it's interesting, Danny Ainge played for Frank Arnold at BYU. He then brought on Gib Arnold, his son, to the Boston Celtics organization as a scout for a handful of years. So it's kind of cool how these, the sports world is so small, Matt, and it just those connections that you build in college, they have lasting impact for years to come. And Danny Ainge obviously went to X and shared his thoughts on the passing of Coach Arnold, but a BYU great that got BYU to some amazing heights and that was Frank Arnold, who passed away earlier this week, the school announced.
All right, let's take another break, Mitch. On the other side, we'll keep this baby rolling. Cougar Sports Saturday, powered by KSLSports.com.